Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to view Rawhead Rex. So, this is another one of those movies where I stumbled upon it because, of course, I was to, spot, this one film that I was like, okay, this looks interesting. But then I kind of scrolled down while I was on Amazon to see what other people watched after that. And then I was like, okay, these movies look really interesting. Okay, what is this? And I'm like, oh my god, Rawhead Rex? What is this about? So, when I was to go through the trailer, I found out that the setting of this movie was in Ireland, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm sold. So, now, what is Rawhead Rex really about? So, teeing it up, we go on and have these farmers that are desperately trying to move this stone that looks more like a totem. And so we have them trying to move this from off the ground, and it seems that once they go on to finally remove this, they end up realizing that that is a massive mistake. And that is to unleash Rawhead Rex out onto the world and start to kill a number of people. We have at some point in this movie where late at night, while Howard, the photographer that has gone on to come to Ireland to take pictures of these certain church locations and is to try to make money off of all this, is to be walking around at night to just kind of get some fresh air, and come to find out while Howard is to go on and do this, he stumbles upon the Rawhead Rex monster that is, of course, to be quite a distance off from him. And so that ends up starting this journey of Howard against this Rawhead Rex character, which then leads Howard to need to go on and defeat this monster because he, of course, is to be driven because he was to have lost something within this film to then push him to be like, this thing needs to die for not only my own kind of peace of mind, but then to also put peace to this town. So come to find out, we have Rawhead Rex, who is to not only be able to look like Mortal Kombat's Goro, or look like a band member from Gwar, GWAR, Gwar. We also have this character that has the ability to pee on people. That was kind of a weird part of this film. But then also, he is to look into certain people's eyes and possess them to have them work for him. And I thought, I was like, okay, that's interesting. Supposedly, this character is to be said that he is to be a devil of sorts. We also have the clan that is at some point to state that this character's name was Rawhead, but they never go on and fully state that his name is Rawhead Rex within this film, which I thought was interesting. We have this very chaotic moment within this trailer park caravan scene, which I thought was really cool. And so with that said, hopefully I'm going to go on and remember everything that happens in this film and kind of put out certain moments and whichever that happened in this movie. But anyways, so this movie is available on Tubi, Tubi. It's currently available on I just said that. It's currently, to me, a grading of a, I would say a good film. Weirdly enough, a lot of people would feel vastly different. People might be goofed out or weirded out by this movie. But I thought the movie was slow. So just imagine if it was a much more fast-paced film, like how I probably would have even gone on and like this movie even more so. So I was easily won over by this movie, I have to admit. But either way, go on and say that you've seen Rawhead Rex because this movie was really interesting. So, with that said, let's go on into that double 5 time territory. I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers, because it's about that time again. It's spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. So, like I was to go on and state, in the beginning of this film, we are to have, of course, Howard kind of driving with the Hallenbeck family to make his way to Ireland, to then, after going to this one town, he's going to go on to Dublin. So, Howard is to make his way to this one church where he is trying to find a Father Kunt. And we have, while this church is in mass, going on and singing this this church song, to then all of a sudden have a number of things happen in this church before Howard arrives. We go on to have one of these women try to pick up this vase or this vase with flowers, and she ends up burning her hands because this red light that ends up coming from the Rawhead Rex window that showcases him is to have this kind of red laser light come in to kind of go on and kind of hurt people. So we have the clan, after Howard leaves, goes on to touch the altar of this church, and the clan ends up turning into a possessed Rawhead Rex follower or minion of sorts. But so Howard goes on into this church before Declan becomes an even more awful person. And so Howard is to ask Declan if he can go on and take certain pictures of this church, and if he can go on and find records and also speak with Father Coot, if he's even pronouncing that correctly. Declan is to admit, yeah, that is how to pronounce it correctly, and so Howard's like, well, where do I go to find Father Coot? And Declan is like, well, then you would go into the the records place. And he's like, Howard's like, okay, where is that? Or the archives. And so Declan ends up kind of like giving him like a go right, go straight, go this, and you'll go there. And Howard's like, okay, like, thanks so much for your just help, you piece of So Howard goes on and meets with Reverend Coot and is to ask him, like, well, hey, like, can I go on and be able to like take as many pictures as I like, go through your records? And Coot is to immediately be very supportive and just be like, sure, yeah, whatever you want, like, I'll help you with whatever you need. And Howard's like, great, at least like somebody's nice here. So we go off, of course, to have Howard, who is taking a number of pictures, and his son Robbie is starting to get irritated. It's like, Dad, you've been here for a while now. And Howard's like, well, yeah, I get it, but like, I still need to get these photos. And so Robbie's like, but I'm hungry, because he's always hungry. And so Howard's like, okay, like give me 10 minutes. And Robbie's like, well, like, Mom is even getting upset because she wants you to stop taking those dang photos. And Howard's like, what did you say? And so I didn't say exactly what he said, but I tried to correct myself with the foul language of a child. So Howard is to state, like, okay, 5 minutes and then we'll go. So speaking of going, let's go on and let's talk about Liam. Liam, of course, is trying to move this stone, kind of using this shovel and a number of items. He's having this tractor that is to be having this barrel with a rope on it. So they're trying to pull this stone, and it seems to not be working out. And so we have Mitch that ends up calling it. Dennis ends up like coming off this tractor, and so Dennis and Mitch are saying like, yeah, I don't think we're gonna pull it out, and so like Dennis is complaining how he's like, well, hey man, like I got supper, like I'm gonna go on it and do that, and so Mitch and Dennis then leave, and Liam says under his breath, it's like, I hope you choke on that supper. So Liam is going on and trying to jerk this stone, and hopefully it'll like tip off and whichever, because he just feels that he's just right there. He's just so close. And come to find out, he ends up getting so close to it that we end up having a moment where Liam has this stone, weirdly enough, get struck by lightning, and Liam ends up falling over, I'm assuming already dead. We then have the stone that falls over, and Rawhead Rex ends up rising from the dirt to then go on and consume Liam after I'm assuming he's already dead from getting hit by lightning. And so now we, of course, have chaos ensue within this town. So we have both Howard and Elaine that are in their hotel room, and Elaine is already complaining about her having to be in this town, and Howard's like, well, I thought you'd be home here, like, with all these people, and kind of talking about like her family and so on and so forth, and Elaine is just like, yeah, no. So we have the kids who are arguing like normal traditional kids would, and so on and so forth. So Elaine is reminding Howard that it's like, well, hey, like, I think it's best to get out of here for like not only me but also for your kids. And Howard's like, oh, so that's who those children belong to. And so Howard's like, okay, like we're gonna need like at least 2 more days, and Elaine's like 1 more day, and he's like 2 more days, and so they're like, okay, all right, deal. So come to find out, we have this couple that kind of walks around town, and we have them getting fairly intimate between one another. And Elaine is saying to Howard, "It's like, you haven't kissed me like that in so long," and because the real benefit of this place being so empty and so open, it seems that they can go on and just make out whenever they want to. But it seems that when they go on and do that, we all of a sudden have a cloaked woman who's like, ahem, and then she moves out of the way, or they move out of the way for this woman to just kind of cross by. And so Howard ends up saying, it's like, well, she'll probably remember us the next time that she sees us while we're walking by here. So we shift into, of course, uh, now this farming couple. A guy named Dennis and a wife named a wife named Jenny, who of course is pregnant. So Dennis of course is to have this shed, and he is to go on and lock it and then come back in. By the time that he comes back in, we then have Jenny telling Dennis that the shed is now opened. Dennis is like, well, I thought I locked that, and Jenny's like, no, like you can see it's swinging open. And so Dennis is like, all right, like I'll fix it. Jenny, of course, is pregnant, fixing food. So Dennis goes back into what is to be this barn or this shed. And so he goes on to look inside this to then hear a noise, and he is consistently asking if someone is there. All of a sudden, we have a number of crates that are nearby, and Rawhead Rex bashes through them, and we then have this really cool looking visual where Dennis is trying to back away from this monster and trying to run away from it, and like Dennis runs down these steps to have Rawhead Rex just kind of jump down and be right in front of him and just just eating them and chomping on them and whatever. But we don't have Rawhead Rex fully consume this guy we have Rawhead Rex kind of dragging this guy along after he finishes off this couple, seemingly. So, or what we would assume is what is going to happen next. So, Jenny, who is seeing the carnage of this monstrous being, realizing that she may be next, Jenny starts going through her house, running up these flights of stairs, and goes into her room, locks this door with the key, and is like, okay, like, is this monster coming? Like, is it coming for me? Is it not coming? Is it just effed off somewhere? So Jenny is to go on and open this door and realize that the monster is there, and the monster ends up breaking through the door anyways, whether or not Jenny locks it or not. So we now have it where Jenny is, oh my god, I'm gonna die. And we have Rawhead Rex, who is looking and realizing that this woman is pregnant. And he's like, like I can't go on and I can't attack this this pregnant woman. So we have Rawhead Rex that leaves Jenny alone, and come to find out, we go on to, of course, have uh, a guy who is wanting to milk cows with this truck make his way to Dennis and Jenny's home, and he sees all the carnage and all the chaos that has happened here. And so this guy, instead of just driving off, be like, F this. Instead, this guy just starts going through the house, starting to call for Dennis and Jenny. And all of a sudden, he ends up finally spotting Jenny, and Jenny's like, she's all traumatized. And so this guy ends up going and calling the police, where we, of course, I believe, end up having this Inspector Larkin, I believe, who is to go on and investigate what is going on with all of these deaths. So we go on and find that Dennis is missing, and they're like, well, Dennis couldn't have gone on and done all this, like, possibly, right? And it's like, no, like, this had to have been multiple attackers. And so it's like, okay, all right. So, but it's actually just one because of this monster being so large. So we have also the inspector, who by the time is to go on and find Liam. Supposedly this is the third victim, and they end up kind of finding the stone fallen, and that this guy has obviously been chomped into, so on and so forth. So I just wanted to make that clear. So we then go on to have Howard, who is looking into the records of this church, and when Howard ends up talking to Father Coop about these records, it seems that all of a sudden, surprisingly, the records are all gone. They have all disappeared. Assuming that the clan, who has gone on and touched this this altar and is to be possessed into helping Rawhead Rex, is to have gone on and destroyed all these records to hide the fact that there is to be a possible weapon here that can go on and help these people of this town. So we go on to have Howard, who's like, okay, that's a little peculiar, as if someone was trying to like ruin what I'm trying to go on and do here. So we, of course, have Howard going back to his hotel, thinking like, okay, like I guess we're just gonna leave now because there's not much else that I can do here. And so they end up kind of taking a rest. They kind of are all going to bed, Howard's family. So we are now to go on and find this caravan / trailer park. And we have a kid named Neil, who it seems is watching, as well as Andy and Katrina, this horror film. And it seems that the only thing that Andy really wants to go on and do is consistently kiss his lover. And Katrina might go on and feel very uneasy about doing this. And so we end up getting Andy and Neil, who start to have this argument. And Andy ends up calling Neil this brat and so on and so forth. And so Neil is ending up playing with these toys and is to have this kind of very loud sounding toy where Andy takes it and is to kind of lock, of course, Neil in this trailer. And Andy and Katrina are to just go on and walk off because supposedly Katrina had something to want to tell Andy. Was she pregnant? Like, what was the reveal here? Because she said that she had something really important to want to tell Andy. Maybe she was dumping him. But I don't know. She never really said. They just kept going on and kind of going more into this woods. And Andy and Katrina, like, were at some points, like, uh, almost going to get more intimate by this tree. And Katrina ends up complaining about being cold and so on. It's like, there's a whole bunch of things that are just kind of just leading us up here to just be like, okay, like, what were they going to really talk about here? Because I don't think Andy's really all that interested. So we, of course, go on and have Rawhead Rex that is just dragging Dennis through the forest and is to hang him upside down, where at some point both Andy and Katrina ends up finding Dennis's body and they end up getting freaked out by it. So they end up running off to find the caravan trailer park people, and that ends up leading us to having Rawhead Rex finding Andy and chopping off the rest of his body from his hand that is to be attached to Katrina. Finding out that Andy has lost his head once they go back in the forest looking for these people that Katrina was to go on and tell all the people in the caravans about. And so Katrina ends up running to these people with a hand in her hand, and she does not even realize it. She's running off just immediately assuming that that of course Andy is attached to her, but he's only attached to her by his hand. So she drops it, and they're like, "Oh my god!" So this massive group of people go on to make their way to find these bodies, but they're not quite sure if the monster is still there. So we have Howard, who is hearing all these police sirens going on, and the police are being called. So Howard, because it's a war zone going outside, we have Howard who's like, well, you know what? I want to go on, and I just want to kind of like walk around and kind of get some fresh air before I go to sleep. We have Elaine who's kind of teasing that maybe they're going to go and get hot and heavy here, but Howard is like, oh no, like I'm just going to go on and just get some fresh air. So Howard ends up walking out into this forest also, and he ends up spotting this huge 8-footed monster. And so Howard is to at some point go on and tell the police what he is to go on and see, and they don't obviously believe him. And plus, Howard didn't really get a good look at it. So, but now we have these caravan people, and so we have Neil that was to go on out of his caravan to kind of walk around. He stumbles face to face with the Rawhead Rex monster, and he ends up running back to the Powers couple, who is both uh, Sean Power and Nancy Power. So they realize how Neil is just so traumatized by seeing the visual of this monster, and so they end up going on to give him to the police, and at some point Neil is to draw what this monster looks like, and so they're like, okay, like this looks very unusual. But so eventually Howard is to draw the same sketch, and they're like, okay, so this thing is obviously to be real because everybody has the same sketch of this same monster of what it looks like. But so, and no one can draw in this town, evidently. Sorry, it's just the truth. But so anyways, we have the caravan people, and we have a moment where Rawhead Rex is to go by one of these caravans and is to start to rock it over and is to push it over. And that then leads to have Sean Powers, who ends up pulling out of one of these windows. And Sean realizes what a mistake that was, is because we then have this monster that is pulling Sean out of this caravan and killing him. So we then have Mary, who is to also be coming out of this caravan via this window, and she ends up getting her whole entire dress ripped from her to where she's wearing nothing underneath. So we go on to have Rawhead Rex, who is to grab this woman and kind of choke her and kill her. We go on to have a number of these people who are all to be just kind of tossed around by Rawhead Rex, and that eventually leads to finally getting some police to make it to this spot to try to go on and just okay, what are we trying to do here? So by that time, we are to also have one of the inspectors, who of course is to be Inspector Isaac Gissing, is to also be under control of Rawhead Rex. So Gissing is going on to help Rawhead Rex out at some point. So meanwhile, we have Howard, who is to have gone on and looked more into the church's pictures and is starting to put these things together, because of course we have Howard that realizes that there's certain photos that have certain things that don't make sense to them, and now he has to realize that there's certain glass pieces that weren't in its right place. So we have Howard connecting the glass pieces, and because at some point they have these glass windows have been restored and changed, and so I guess people didn't realize what the difference was. So we have Howard that goes on to go to the police station and is to now figure out that there is to be some kind of weapon of sorts that is to kill off this monster, and he is to make the connection through all of these church photos. So he's kind of waiting for an inspector to kind of tell him, hey man, here is this weapon, find it somewhere in this church and beat this thing and kill this thing off. Because when Howard is to want to try and leave town, we have his family kind of driving off, thinking it's okay, I guess we're off to Dublin. And we go on to have Minty that is in desperate need of needing to go to the bathroom. And so that then goes on to having them just kind of like pull off to this one opened area that has these kind of bushes. It just tells Minty, it's like, okay, just go to the bathroom, like by one of these bushes, like no one's gonna be here. And so Howard is trying to do the right thing by like, hey, like I'm gonna like be with my daughter just to make sure that everything goes okay. And so come to find out, when Minty ends up screaming, Howard and Elaine end up getting out of the car to then go after their daughter, to realize that Minty had gone on to see this dead rabbit. So while Robbie's by himself in this van, we then go on to see the Rawhead Rex monster, who, of course, is to go on and pull this kid out of the car and have him disappear. We, of course, never get to see like the carnage of Rawhead Rex killing this kid, because of course not, because that would be a good thing to not show. The only thing that we end up seeing is his shoe in a comic book, so we could have assumed that this kid didn't actually die and that he's just missing. But anyways, so but we would have to naturally assume that this kid is dead. So we are back at the caravan slash trailer park, and so now we are going on with that carnage. I realized that I'd probably gotten ahead of myself with all of the caravan trailer park stuff, but I just figured I would go on and just kind of get all of that out of the way so I can get that out of my brain so I can kind of finish up this film. So we go on to have Gissing, who is to pour gasoline right where all of these officers are, and he then is to light this match and then douse all of these officers in flame, and all these detectives and inspectors and whatever. So Gissing then is to go on and walk to Rawhead Rex and set himself on fire also. What a moron. But we have this guy who is going on and stating to Rawhead Rex, it's like, this is for you, like, for you. And I'm like, this just seems just like the Omen scene, where, of course, we have the one woman who's like, Damien, this is for you. And then she hangs herself. Awful and whatever. But so we then, of course, go on to have this chaos. And so we are to now go back to the church to realize that there is a weapon within this church. And so Reverend Coot is to also touch the altar, and all that is to do for him is that he ends up getting some like bubbles on his fingers, but that's about it. So it seems that certain things get affected by this altar differently. But I guess there is to be a thing of which to hinder people from trying to get to this altar, but people are affected by this altar in different ways. So we have Reverend Coot, who is to at some point realize that O'Brien has changed, and that at some point this is all leading up to this monster coming back to this church. And so the Reverend is immediately thinking that this monster isn't going to go and get in here, and that also like Coot is trying to use certain items like a crucifix to try and get this monster to go away. And so we have at one point where Rawhead Rex arrives at this church is to take this crucifix and break it. And so if Reverend Coot isn't running around this church trying to run away from this thing and is at some point to ask Declan, like, well, hey, like, what are you gonna, what are you wanting to get from this thing? And Declan is to state, it's like, well, I hope that it kills me, because that's what I want. So we have Reverend Coot, who is to have at some point the Rawhead Rex attack him and kill him after the crucifix is to be broken. So we go on to have Howard, who is to make his way into this church after talking to Reverend Coot, and he ends up stating about the altar. He keeps talking about the altar. So Howard runs to the altar and is to fight with the clan, where we have them tussling around. Howard ends up finding this burnt book, shoves it in Declan's face, and then Declan ends up figuring out a way to knock Declan out. We also had Reverend Coot, while he was still alive, bizarrely going out to this graveyard to see Declan meeting up with Rawhead Rex, and that, of course, is when Rawhead Rex just pees all over Declan, and he weirdly enjoys it, as if this is some weird, goofy thing. To, I guess, to be baptized by Rawhead Rex is to be peed on. Oddly enough, because we want Declan stating to Coot, it's like, well, hey, how about you be baptized also? Like, to have him pee on me? I don't think so. But yeah, so we go on and we have Howard, who is to go on and trying to lift up this altar, and he ends up getting his hands burnt by it. So he ends up finding this candlestick, and he ends up kind of pushing the candlestick to lift this thing up. And come to find out, the thing that is to be the weapon against Rawhead Rex is to not legitimately be a sword after all. It's just to be this unusually shaped stone. So, come to find out, we have Howard that is thinking like, okay, like, I'm gonna go on and find Rawhead Rex and just show this stone to him and it'll defeat him. Come to find out, that's not exactly the case. So Howard was to go on and leave the hotel, hoping that Elaine would just kind of stick around. No. Let me correct myself. Howard was at the police station, and so was Elaine. And we had Howard that was hoping one of these officers was going to go on and watch over his wife and his kid. And Elaine instead makes his way to where Howard is to try to figure out if she can go on and help Howard defeat this monster. And come to find out, in all honesty, Elaine is to go on and pick up this unusual stone after Howard, it seems, is not having the stone work. And the whole key of it is that Elaine needed to go on and grab the stone, not Howard, to defeat this thing, because as soon as she is to rise it over her head, she goes on to start to have this beam, or this kind of weird, unusual kind of laser light show, ending up going on and attacking Rawhead Rex. And at some point, we then go on and have then Rawhead Rex start to get weakened by this and start to lose all of his power. And so we also have this uh, this kind of this woman kind of come in and kind of do this whole kind of thing, which is to possibly either be an angel or be possibly significant to being uh, a certain kind of Bible figure of sorts. But anyways, so this Rawhead Rex is to become weakened, and so we have Howard that is to smack this thing with the shovel, and all of a sudden, Rawhead Rex is to be buried underneath all of this cement and stone and whichever, all of this concrete. And we're assuming that this monster is now dead, that it is taken care of, and they bury this monster. So we have Howard that is to finally state to his wife, it's like, okay, we're definitely gonna get out of here now. We're definitely gonna go home. And so the next thing we end up seeing is Neil to put flowers on his brother's grave, and we end up seeing Rawhead Rex that arises from his grave to then go on and possibly wreak havoc on this town yet again. So, definitively, like, what is the way to actually defeat this monster? Is there legitimately a way? Was there ever going to be a sequel that reveals that? I don't know. But so, with that said, either way, this movie was fun. I liked it. So, with that said, I'm just going to go on and get out of here. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about Rawhead Rex. If you liked this movie, if you thought it was too goofy or too stupid, at the end of the day, I don't care because I liked this film. So, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.